Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, welcome to a specially pre-recorded episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is going out on Monday, but this is Friday morning that we're doing it. So if we get our future and past and present tenses all mixed up, just bear with us. I'm an old man. Anyway, Taylor is going to be unavailable on Monday. I believe you got some professional and personal obligations to take care of. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so there you are. But we always like to provide you with the latest news anyway. So today I'm just going to talk about a couple of things. Greg Abbott gave a speech on Thursday night about the state of the state. I'm sure you were wrapped in attention to it. Actually, I saw where it was going to be broadcast, and it was like on these very obscure cable channels. So it wasn't hardly breaking news or anything like that. But I'll talk about a couple of things you mentioned in there because the State of the State address is seen as the agenda for the legislature, which has been meeting now for about 5 weeks. But one of the things I teach in my Texas government class is the first 2 months of it, there's a lot of piddling and diddling, and then finally they get serious. And so this is seen as like the starting gun for the agenda. We'll talk about that. I also want to talk about this debt and deficit issue. I mean, everybody's in Washington is going through the usual drama and trauma about violating the debt limit and are we going to default and all this other business. And I'll talk about that and the reality of it, the possibility of it, and what would the impact be if this actually happened? And lastly, I have a comment about a local Burleson matter, and I'll save it for then. So let's talk about Mr. Abbott first. Well, first of all, let's talk about the ads. I mean, my gosh, let's time to talk a little capitalism. I keep forgetting that when I get home. Let's talk about CrossFit Burleson, 317 South West Wilshire. It's a great workout for those who really want a serious workout. They're not looking just to keep fit. They want to get fit. They want to look for swimsuit season, right, or something like that. But it's a very strenuous workout. So we appreciate Daniel for what he does for the community and what he does for Eagles Nest down in Guatemala. And if you're looking for a workout that's a serious workout, check out CrossFit Burleson on 317 Southwest Wilshire. And they have plans, they have programs, they got trainers, they got the whole 9 yards. Thank you also to Shandy Stogsdill Group. The 817life.com page is a good page for local community interest. But the Stogsdill Group with Shandy knows her real estate. She knows all about what's going on in this area. And as we've been talking about quite often the last couple of months, she is a candidate for place 4 on the school board. And speaking on that matter, Dallas Owen, who is also a candidate for place 4, will be on the Tuesday show. So if you're looking to inform your vote, listen to this podcast. You are going to have both the candidates on. They're both good people. I think my support for Shandy is well known, but Dallas Owen is a decent, good person, and so is her family. And so we're honored to have both of them willing to contribute their time. Also, thank you to Our Place. Otto is another decent, good person, and is a decent, and more than a decent place. Our place is one of the favorite places in town. People go there not just for the great food, but also the service, the friendliness, the atmosphere, the inclusiveness. If you ever go into it, you'll see a wide diversity of people. It tells me a lot about the owner and tells me a lot about the restaurant, where people of all different categorizations you hear to put upon them, they feel comfortable in that place. And so Our Place is a great place. I mentioned that to Otto, and he said he never even noticed it until I brought it up with him. But anyway, Our Place is definitely Our Place. Thank you to Chris, another place that's very diverse in its clientele. I went there a couple of weeks ago, and it was full. It was pretty full. But it was about 4 in the afternoon. It was about half full, beginning, and started filling up, after the work day was coming to an end, and it was another diverse crowd, something that he is very proud of and pleased with, and we all should be. Wild cigar culture. It's a good place for a smoke, a drink, maybe even watch the ball game, maybe just do a little business, and there you go. Also, thank you to Tiffany at Local Life Magazine. This is the busy week for her, trying to get it out in time, and she always does. She's never missed a deadline, and because she really puts a lot of effort into this. Local Life Magazine, it'll be out in about 10 days. LocalLifeTX.com is up if you want to keep something current. So check it out. Also, for one of the better aspects of the magazine, it's a great magazine, is their focus on local businesses. I believe this month is real estate. Also, thank you to Gala at Southern Gym. They're open right now. Again, past tense. This is being a Mondays, theoretically. They're closed on Mondays, but they're open the other days of the week. Not Sunday either. I'm butchering this up. Sorry, Gala. At Southern Gym on the top of the Windmiller building, it's a great place for gifts. Ladies, you can go there and you have a wish list so your husbands know what to buy you. Men, if you're looking for something to buy the wives, you can get a lot of assistance. You're looking for something for yourself. They have that. They have repairs. They have appraisals. They have cleanings. They have the whole full service. And pretty soon, we're hoping in about 5 weeks, we'll be in their new space downstairs. Also, thank you to Michelle Humphrey over at Hotworks in 731. It's a great place for another type of workout with infrared. It helps with your inflammation, helps with your joints, helps with the muscle pains and aches. So Hotworks is a great place for that kind of thing. And I've been told there's a lot of crossover clients between Hotworks and CrossFit because you go for the heavy duty workout and then go over to the Hotworks for the yoga or the Pilates or something like that, and kind of help stretch your muscles. Also, Melissa Harmon, Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent. Hopefully, she could be yours. 682-804-0534. She can look at your insurance and tell you if you are paying, getting the most for your money. And if you are, she'll tell you. If not, she'll tell you that too. I switched over and saved some money, and I got an increase in both my house and life insurance. And so it's a very good deal. Texas Farm Bureau has a great reputation for customer service, and Melissa has a great reputation with her friends and clients. So 682-804-0534. Okay. Thursday night, Governor Abbott gave the speech, State of the State. Again, or like I was kind of joking about, is hardly attended to at all by public media or anything like that. You could have streamed it, you could have watched it on some obscure cable channel, but it's not. It doesn't get the attention, of course, that circus that Joe Biden and whoever is president puts on every year. There was about 3 things or 4 things that I noticed about it. I read about it this morning's paper or Friday's paper, and I think it's worth talking about because it's one of the issues is particularly close to home, and I have a very nuanced view on it, and I'll get to that one in a minute. One of the thing I thought was interesting, he said he's going to try to get in the state of Texas, if you are dealing fentanyl that ends up in the death of a user, you will be charged with capital murder. Now, in Texas, just about every type of murder can result in a death sentence. There's very few types of murder, if you will, or circumstances in which a murder has been committed, in which capital punishment is not on the table. I teach that government class at Hill about Texas government, and we talk about the judicial system. There's like 11 to 12 different categories in which a murder could have been committed, and therefore it elevates it to a capital offense. And this will be elevated to a capital offense if you are dealing fentanyl and one of your users dies from it. Fentanyl is a really, really serious problem. It's probably the most lethal drug that I can remember in my lifetime. And the border situation, which is the second thing I was going to address, leads into that because regardless of all the crap you hear from Washington, fentanyl is coming across our borders. The Texas agents will tell you, the border agents will tell you that not everyone, certainly not even a majority of them, but there are enough of these guys smuggling in fentanyl through our porous borders that is causing a real problem. And the fact that fentanyl is a manufactured drug is makes it even more of a hazard because you can make it anywhere. But what's happening is we are having a rush of fentanyl across our borders, and the Biden administration will sit there and sniff and holler about how he's doing all this about it. He's not doing anything about it. The border situation is a real problem, and uh, we don't need to. I don't want to go into that area where we castigate all people trying to cross the border like Mr. Trump did back in 2015 as dealers and rapists and criminals, because they're not. But there's enough of them to make this a serious problem. And no matter how noble or I don't know noble's the word, but how much shine we want to put on the illegal immigrant situation, the fact remains that we do have people crossing the border illegally to commit illegal situations here in the United States. And when I read somebody talking about trying to compare illegal immigrants to the Holy Family and stuff like that, and like some of those commercials do, I get a little bit irritated because maybe 1 in 1,000 really are bad people, but that's enough with these numbers to make it really a real problem. Also, tax relief. Now that's an annual Republican thing. Right now, we are projected to have $34 billion in surplus. The Texas Constitution allows us to keep X amount of money. It's a percentage of our total budget in something called a rainy day fund, but we can't exceed that much. And so, in other words, this $34 billion cannot be, by constitutional edict, set aside strictly for the fund. Once you tap the top end of that fund, once you get into to the place where it's full, that money has to be either spent or given back to the taxpayers. Out of the 34 billion, Mr. Abbott suggested 15 billion should go back in the largest property tax deduction in our history. What that means for you personally, I don't know. It depends on your own property tax situation. But there's a few things we need to keep in mind. One is that the idea of spending all that $34 billion on, pet projects is not going to happen. So we might as well not even be fighting about that. But I would like to see some of that surplus be spent on things that we really, really do need. We do need some upgrades in some of our schools. We do need some upgrades in our mental health and other county and statewide provided services. We do need some improvements in some of our social safety nets. Texas is a great place to be rich and a tough place to be poor because we've always been a low tax, low service state. And politically, that's been our case since post Civil War. So this is nothing. We should just look at Abbott and his crew as they're responsible for this. The Democrats, when they ran the state, where they had the same attitude. So yeah, tax relief will be nice. The other side of the coin about tax relief at the state level is what does it do to tax situations at the local level? If it cuts into the revenues of the school systems and your counties and your cities, where's that money going to come from? It isn't like you can just raise taxes to make up the difference. If they cut contributions to all these local governing units because of lower state revenues or tax cuts, not revenues. That's not the word I meant, but lower tax cuts. That money may have to be made up somewhere else, and it isn't nearly as feasible or as easy for the school districts in particular, but any local governing unit just to raise taxes to make up the difference. It isn't like if you got like a 2% or a 3% tax cut from the state that the school board can raise your taxes 2 or 3% to make up the difference. They are very restricted on how much they can raise local taxes. So is the city of Burleson. So is Johnson County. So, yeah, I'd like to see a lower monthly payment as well, but I don't want to see it at the cost of our public institutions. So if they can somehow thread that needle, that we have lower tax from the state without damaging the local units, then who wouldn't be for that? But if it impacts negatively upon the schools or the city of Burleson and their services they can provide, or Johnson County, then we need to really consider that. Now, everybody really is upset about their taxes at the local level. I pay a lot of taxes. My friends and family that live outside of Texas that don't have very much in property taxes are amazed at our property tax payments every year. Nobody really thinks that, well, I need to be paying more. Every time I talk to a member of the city council on my show or just in conversation, and I bring this topic up with them, they know it's a problem, particularly when you have rising values on real estate like we do. When our home values rise, even if the city council can cut the percentages, which they have, the members and the mayor will tell you that, there's still the overall payment still rising because of the increases in real estate values. So my point about the taxes is let's look at that pretty carefully. Don't just say, hey, the state's giving me, some sort of tax cut, because that tax cut may either come at a cost at something that you care about locally, and or it may have to be made up if the city has the ability to raise taxes. The school board, the school system has very limited ability to do that. So that's another thing I'd be concerned. And speaking of schools, here's something that's even more controversial, and that is the voucher system. Previously, the people that wanted to have uh, some sort of public support of the private institutions of education, they went to something called educational savings accounts, which are very similar to health savings accounts. That never really got through the House, and primarily it wasn't those liberal Democrats. Also, you had conservative Republicans that were voting against that because they saw it as some sort of detriment to their rural school districts, and the rural legislator proportionally has a lot more swing than say one of the urban ones. Okay, the way our system is set up, those rural representatives really do have a lot of clout. What Mr. Abbott last night was basically vouchers, state support for private institutions, where you would get, well, basically the money would follow the kid, is how they always put it. Does that mean that if I here in Burleson said I want to send my kid to Southwest Christian, would I have public money to do that? The answer is yes, under this system. What would happen to the money that Burleson ISD would have received had my kid gone to, Centennial or Burleson High or whatever? Well, they wouldn't get that money. They would go to, with the student, to private school. And it doesn't have to be a religiously oriented private school either. It could be any kind of, charter school, public school, any school. I could take the money and go to Alvarado High School if my kid wanted to do that, which they're well past that age, of course. But the point is that the money would follow the kid, and the biggest contention point, there's two of them. One is that what will happen to, say, some of the urban districts where you have people that say, I'm tired of this routine. I'm going to take my money and go elsewhere. I'm going to put my kid in a private school. What would Fort Worth ISD and Dallas ISD feel about that? Second of all is the church-state relationship. Now, that being said, the trend and the recent Supreme Court decisions have supported the idea of vouchers being for the children and not for the school, and therefore this idea that the money follows the kid has been constitutionally supported, and not just by the recent Roberts Court. This has been around for about 2 decades now. It's really not a constitutional objection that's kept it from happening. It's more of political objections. So is it constitutional? Well, about 20 years ago, the courts ruled that if schools, particularly those that were not achieving educational standards, then parents could use that money and go to private schools. Now, almost every colleague I have opposed to vouchers, and I understand all the reasoning for it. I will say this about vouchers. In Burleson, will that be a big problem? I don't think as much, because we offer a good product here. And the cost of private school is still greater than the amount that the voucher one would receive would cover. So if I wanted to send my kid to Southwest Christian, having a voucher may make a little more affordable, but it won't pay. But it'll be about a fourth of the tuition. And so I don't know if that's going to be the issue for Burleson. Now, it would be an issue for Fort Worth, because you would have people that want to say, I want to send my kid to a couple of private schools, and they'll have opportunities maybe to go there. And I've always said it is almost criminal to force a kid to go to a failing school just because of their lack of mobility, just because the only way you can get an education is go to the local school, because you don't have any other means of transportation or getting to the other schools. I think it's a mistake, or it's almost a crime that kid's going to have to go to a malfunctioning high school merely because of geography. Now, a couple months ago, I had Dr. Lindsay Bird on about BISD, and how do we handle that? We have schools of choice, and a lot of districts have done that. Some are copying Burleson's idea, and that way, those choices may somewhat offset the need for vouchers. Okay, now I want to say that again. Because BISD has schools of choice, if I'm not real satisfied with the school that I'm zoned to go to, for whatever reason, I have choices within the district. And there's other districts actually have open enrollment, like Cleburne, I believe, does. So this school choice business and vouchers can be somewhat negated if you have schools of choice. And if we don't have this in Burleson, but let's just take District X with multiple schools, and then one of those schools is very, very poor. There are ways that we don't have to relegate the kids in that zone to that poor school. And I taught at Southwest Christian for 3 years. The attitude of the teachers in particular was that they're not that crazy about vouchers. A lot of them came from the public school system. Some that had taught only in private schools understood the impact it would have on the private school system. So this image you might think of the private school teachers. I'm not going to speak for the administrators or the finance guy. They can speak for themselves. But the teachers that I was with at Southwest Christian, and I would encounter with other private schools when I was in that world, so to speak, they're not crazy about vouchers. Why? Because they know that most of their students come from families with the wherewithal to go to Southwest Christian, either from a parent or a grandparent or something like that. And they were not comfortable at all taking money that could have gone to public school kids and helping those that live in Mira Vista attend Trinity or Trinity Valley or your Country Day or Fort Worth Christian or Southwest Christian, any of those schools. So I would impose upon the listener, impart to the listener is a better way of putting it, that don't be thinking that the teachers in the private school system are rubbing their hands and excited about all this money that's coming their way, because they're not going to see it. And the parents of that have those kids there will see it. Now, if I'm asked, am I in favor of vouchers? What I'm in favor of is trying to detach, that's the better word, detach the fact a kid has to go to a school because of geography. I oppose very much the activities of these teacher unions in the Midwest and the Northeast that oppose any kind of accountability to the school systems or the teachers themselves. Last year, in the state of Illinois, two teachers were fired for incompetence after a lengthy process. Why? Because the unions there are so strong. Well, actually, I want to be more specific. It was the school system in Chicago had two that were fired for incompetence, but the school system in Chicago has had like 33,000 teachers, I believe. That can't happen and have a quality educational system, and that's why so many people are going to vouchers, because they don't see the accountability in a lot of these school districts. I'm not just talking about Texas. I'm talking about across. Now, do we have accountability here in BISD? Yes, we do. More so than certainly in the Northeast or Midwest. Why? Because we don't have unions with collective bargaining power. We have teacher associations, which I was a part of, and I believe teachers should be represented in that process down in Austin. And associations do a lot of good things. But it's not a collective bargaining union that can hold the school system hostage or educational reform, be denied. So what I would say to my fellow teachers and people said, if this voucher system really bothers you, then understand the motivations behind it. It isn't so much, greedy people down in Austin want to destroy the public school system. Even though yesterday I got my Texas Monthly magazine, which I really enjoy, but the gist of its headline article is about the plot to destroy public schools. And as far as the other issues with public schools about critical race theory and all this other business, that the BISD for the BISD, I will say that's rubbish. And it's if people in our city are trying to make BISD into some woke critical race theory, public activation of socialist ideology or whatever else, they're using it for their own purposes. It's not true that we are a woke school district just because we don't cater to their very conservative ideology. We are still a pretty conservative town, and it's reflected in our schools. And so when I hear or see somebody that get all indignant and say that teachers are trying to create social activists and that they're teaching race theory and that, or gay acceptance or whatever else that gets them all bent out of shape, I just think they're using it for political purposes. And and I would ask any school board member that question, and they will tell you it's not happening, and they're not being blind about it. Let's switch gears and talk about the deficit and the debt. Right now, we hit the ceiling supposedly of the $31.4 trillion in total debt. I mean, it's astounding to me because about 15 years ago, the debt was about a third of that. Now it's gone up. The last three administrations have basically tripled our national debt. And we hit the ceiling, not constitutionally, what am I saying? The congressionally mandated ceiling. And now Joe wants it to be raised again to keep spending more money and not have anything attached to it. And the Republicans on their side saying, well, if you want us to raise the debt limit, we're going to need to have some reforms and some spending cuts and things of that nature. On theory, I like that idea. What the Republicans have, we do need to cut certain. Downside is, though, what we're having with um, the first of all, the Republicans have not specified what it is. Second of all, majority of them don't want to touch entitlement programs. That was one of the mischaracterizations, and I'm being nice when I say that about Mr. Biden's speech. I want to say fabrications, delusional. Let's just call it what it is. It's a lie. Most Republicans don't want to cut Social Security. There was a couple that said it. This guy over here, this senator over there, and he took that and said that's the whole platform of the Republican Party is to want to cut grandma's Social Security and your Medicare. That's not true. Now, does it need to be true? The answer is we're never going to get the kind of budgets that are even remotely in balance unless we do something about entitlements. And everybody knows that, but politically they know it's total and complete disaster. Joe Biden gets up there on his State of the Union and tries to make political points by saying he's protecting Social Security against these vandals and Huns that come in. And then Donald Trump ran in 2016 and 20 saying, I will not cut Social Security. Mr. Obama, same thing. And so what we're saying is the entitlement sector or section of our budget is growing every year. And since that's been taken off the table, we have less and less in which to cut on. And as we continue to money, another non-negotiable payment is the interest on this debt. And we're looking at a situation now with the way both entitlements and the interest is growing, that basically the entire budget within a decade is going to be dedicated almost solely to that. So if we're going to maintain, the streets and the military and government services of any kind, then we're going to have exceptionally high taxes or about zero in discretionary type programs. Now, people say, well, just cut the military. Look how much money they get. The interesting thing about the military aspect of it is that we, as a part of our GDP, we're at the lowest level we've spent in 20 years, 30 years. Our budget for the problem with the budget we have for the defense isn't so much but it's like so many other things, partially funded, not fully funded. But the point is that we're not going to be able to cut the budget solely by cutting down on the F-35. Second of all, it's not going to happen politically. When the defense budget was passed, it was by large bipartisan majorities. And I was reading about this. I got all my information about this from Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, National Review, my go-tos, if you will. And we're going to add in the next decade, according to the headline or Thursday of the New York Times, was that U.S. is on track to add $19 trillion in new debt over 10 years. We're going to have nearly $2 trillion per year of new debt, because the money we're spending is just out of control. And it's not just on frivolous things. It's a lot of, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and all those type of programs they're essential parts of a lot of people's lives, obviously, but they do cost tons of money. All right. Medicaid alone is going to hit $1 trillion this year. And so right now, if you added up Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, that would be nearly $4.5 trillion for this year's budget. Okay. We're going to have a $1.4 trillion deficit, and Biden's strutting around saying, I'm bringing down the deficit. Well, again, you know why? Because we're not spending $2 trillion on COVID relief like we did in this first year. So yeah, there's going to be some decline because we're not spending $2 trillion on top of what we've already been spending. But the New York Times very clearly says, and so did the Washington Post, and so did Wall Street Journal. I didn't copy all those because they all said roughly the same thing, is that is that we're going to be in a situation where almost entirely we're going to be in a situation entirely where we're looking at about $50 trillion in debt by the year 2033 rather. $50 trillion. I, I can't even imagine how much in my head. But basically, just to keep pace with those entitlement programs, that's what's going to have to happen. And he said, well, let's raise taxes. Good luck on that. The Democrats are more than content to raise taxes on certain people with a lot of exit hatches for certain people. Okay. When they say raise taxes on the rich, you should see in your head a big major asterisk, because they're not talking about just hammering, Bill Gates. They're talking about, people they define as rich, and an ever lower floor for that. Second of all, they have so many different ways of getting around that really effectively it's not changing the taxes that much at all. And furthermore, particularly when you have high tax states, there's a reason why Texas and Florida are growing exponentially. And California and New York and Illinois are losing population because you add federal taxes onto the already incredibly high state taxes, particularly in California. They're going to say, I'm picking up my company or my family, and I'm going to move to Utah, which is already complaining about the Californians. In Texas, which, there you go. We already have that going on too. But that basically, it's next year, the total amount of public debt is going to equal our total GDP. I want to make a side note here about public and private debt. Of that $31 trillion in deficit, or debt rather, about $7 trillion is held by the government itself. Now, it sounds confusing when I teach this to students, but when Social Security has a surplus, they buy bonds with it. They don't just leave it in the bank. So at least those bonds could be earning minimal interest. Okay. So if you have, you have Social Security, if you have states, you have others that have surpluses, they'll buy government securities with it. The downside is now that the interest rates are rising, the payments are going higher. And that's why the interest is going to be more and more and more of a factor. Furthermore, every time they raise rates, the bonds you already own become less valuable. If you had bought a government bond at 3.5% and they put one out because of higher interest rates at 5%, nobody's going to want your 3.5% bond on the secondary markets. You're going to have to sell it at a loss to unload it. If you wanted to buy a 5% bond, by selling your old bonds, you're going to lose money. You're going to have to do it at a discount. Second of all, is that 24 trillion public debt, it's owned by you and me and institutions and foreigners and everybody else. That percentage is climbing, because what's happening is that the surpluses in these accounts in the government are getting smaller and smaller. So they have less money in which to buy these bonds. Social Security is going to go bankrupt, according to the actuary accounting, in about a decade, despite what you hear about it on MSNBC, which I saw an episode with one of their more knucklehead commentators completely denying it. And it's like, wow, are you either lying or you're obtuse? But the point is that the public sector section of the total debt is going to get greater and greater. Now, let's say that we default, like Janet Yellen and others are yelling and hollering about. And that's no pun intended. That sounded good though. Supposedly, according to the Washington Post, it's going to be around between July and September that this will go default. And what does that mean? It means we're not paying our bonds, or we're not going to be able to pay our debts. Does that mean we have no money? No, we'll have money. We just won't have enough of it. We'll have money. The question is going to be, who's going to get paid? Okay. Is it going to be the bondholders, or is it going to be the people that do business with the government? Is Lockheed going to get paid? Is Bell Helicopter? Is the millions of businesses that do business transactions with the federal government, are they going to get paid? A few years ago, Illinois went through this, and they couldn't pay off their debts. And so they had to either pay off the state bonds or their vendors. They paid off the bondholders because they're creditors. Let's be very clear. Creditors are not the same as accounts payable. And so Illinois is having to pay off the creditors. They were given IOUs to the people that do business with the state of Illinois in all the various capacities. From the office supply company to the people provide school lunches and whatever else. That's probably what's going to happen here. Is that the bondholders are creditors. It's not, if the government owed me $1,000 for whatever reason, but I may not get paid. If I had a $1,000 bond that had interest on it, I would get paid. It'd be devastating for our economy, not because our bondholders wouldn't get their money, but because a lot of other people wouldn't. Second of all, it'd absolutely destroy our credit rating. We have a pretty good credit rating, but when your credit rating gets to junk status, like some states have, to entice a buyer to buy a bond, you have to offer higher interest rates. And if the United States goes through this, really does go through this, then our bonds are going to become, uh, we're going to have to, well, they'll be more expensive. We're going to have to raise the interest rates on our bonds to encourage buyers to take what is now a less valuable or more risky bond. And that's the issue here. I can't imagine the upheaval in this country next fall if Chinese bondholders or Belgian bondholders or Japanese bondholders were getting paid, whereas my company is not, and we're laying off employees by the thousands. That's where you get the revolution. Not all this hair pulling in Portland and youngins raising Cain. This would get grandma out in the street. What would so the people that be the first in line to get paid will be the creditors, not the accounts payable. I hope I've explained that. And the impact on the creditors is, oh, you want me to buy another bond? I need a couple more points of interest. And so the interest payments would even be higher. Janet Yellen is correct. It would be a catastrophe. My problem is, Biden said, I'm not going to negotiate. Well, that's a hell of a position to take, Mr. President. He says, I'm not going to negotiate. I want a clean raise of the debt ceiling, and I don't want any more lip about it. Well, that's not going to happen in a messy Democratic system. The problem with the Republicans is they haven't put out a plan yet, and we don't know where they would cut it. And they made it also say, we're not going to negotiate on tax raises. The truth of the matter is, with our system we have, we're going to have to increase some taxes and cut some spending. Both these parties are going to have to really go through some pain. They're not going through pain. They are exceptionally pain averse. And so they're not going to do it. The Democrats will not cut spending, and the Republicans will not raise taxes. And we're going to see this in July or late June, this kabuki theater dance like we saw in 2011 with Mr. Obama and Mr. Boehner and Mitch McConnell and all this other stuff. We're going to see that this is not going to be solved next week. Why? Because right now, bills are still getting paid. And how they're doing that is they're rearranging some accounting and they're shifting one fund to another and all this other, sleight of hand. But sooner or later, that's going to end, like they said, midsummer. And we're going to see this again. And we're going to see Biden talk about how the Republicans want to drive us off the cliff and take grandma with them. And the Republicans say Mr. Biden wants to tax everybody at 100% and bring a socialist agenda about. So, yeah, I'm a little frustrated. Both parties are going to have to move off this no negotiation stance. The Republicans are going to have to agree to some tax increases. The Democrats are going to have to agree to some discretionary funding cuts. Both are going to have to agree that entitlement reform is necessary. And they're going to have to tell the AARP and other lobbying groups, sit back and let us do our work because this has got to happen. But if you say, well, we need to reconsider Social Security, even just think it too loudly, the Democrats will jump all over you. If you're a Republican and you say, well, we might want to consider tax changes and increases on certain functions or people, the Republicans will jump all over you. So right now, I'm not very optimistic, but I'm telling you, we're coming to a climactic story in July and June, all that. Lastly, I mentioned something about a local Burleson issue. This particular week or last week, okay, on Tuesday, there was a party at the Burleson Library that was supposed to be for those that don't have Valentine's Day. It was advertised as anti-love, anti-Valentine's. I will say, I think it was a great idea. Anti-love may have been a little. There's some modification in the wording that may have helped, convey a different meaning to some. But the idea was great because Valentine's to me is one of the most difficult holidays for young people. For some of us like old guys, Valentine's is great, wonderful, wonderful, no big deal. But when you're a young person and you're just now starting to experience, romantic relationships, if you will, it's very difficult when you see your buddy having a girlfriend and you don't, that kind of thing. And you feel left out on these kind of holidays when the emphasis is on couples, not on individuals. And I saw it all the way through school. As a teacher, I'd see, Valentine's Day, you'd see a girl get pretty flowers or the guy would get some sort of, small gift. But the vast majority of them didn't have those kind of relationships and they felt kind of left out by it all. And some of them, it didn't really bother them very much, but some of them it did. And so I really applaud the library for reaching out to those kids. And I addressed it on my show Thursday with Ronnie Johnson, and Mr. Fletcher, Mayor Fletcher, has put out a post on his page about his response to it. I encourage you to both listen to my show and read the responses. I agree with them both. But my problem is this: the way it was done, the bullying tactics by one of our council members, and then posting it on his personal page about what he's done for the community, which is not the appropriate venue. And the singling out of the Burleson Library staff. We have a great library in this town. It's difficult to have great personnel when they feel like they're in a work environment in which members of the city council do not support them or treasure and value them. Monday night, tonight, I guess, if you're hearing this, there's going to be an opportunity for you to speak on this at the city council meeting. I would encourage you to email your council members and the mayor and tell them what you think about this. I would encourage if you feel strongly about this and you feel like that our library was singled out for a political grandstanding stunt, then go to the meeting. You have time to talk. You come in, you go to the left, you go to the city secretary. She hands you a speaker card. She gives it to the mayor, and at the opening of the meeting, there they go. Now it's going to be unpleasant and contentious. But I applaud the Burleson Library for what they did. Would I have used a different word than anti-love? Yes, but I understand what they were trying to say, so I didn't take offense to it. I didn't get all worked up about it. And so I encourage you, if you feel strong enough, to email the council members and or show up and give your 3 minutes about it. Because this made the Star Telegram. This makes it more difficult to attract and keep talented people in our city as not just in city government, but just as a whole. We don't need the reputation of having a city council that is going to be antagonistic, at least a couple of members being antagonistic about it. They don't want to work in that environment. Now, I know the majority of the city council members were appalled by this. I've already spoken to 3 of them, and they did not care for us one bit. They were shocked. They were mad. They were upset that this happened in their community because all 3 of them very much supported this. The mayor, I encourage you to read his page. I think it was well written. I think it was a good response. I think that was an appropriate response. I think Ronnie Johnson had a very appropriate response on the show. Okay, if this is an issue for you, you know what to do. If we don't do anything, if we don't make our minds known about this, it'll happen again to some other department for some other reason. So that's all I have to say about that, as Forrest Gump would say. When you hear this, it'll be Monday. So tomorrow, Dallas will be on. I look forward to that. I've known the Owen family for many years, taught her 3 sons, and they are a family of respect and honor in this community and well-deserved. And so I look forward to hearing her answers. Next Thursday, I'm not quite sure. I have something tentative, but sometimes a guest will say, how about this date? And I don't like to, unless it's pretty consistent, I don't like to put it out there yet. And if not, I'll just be ranting about Joe Biden's latest outrage. He never fails to deliver. And speaking of never failing to deliver, Taylor, how are you doing?
I am well.
All right. When will this be on, by the way?
We'll post it Monday. I can post a podcast with it too.
Oh, the whole thing, huh? Okay, good for
Sure.
you.
Why not?
Well, have fun at your business/personal weekend you got going on.
I will.
All right, y'all take care, and I'll see y'all in the studio on Tuesday. Bye-bye.